This video we're going to talk about noise in Lightroom, and here's a good example of a photo that has a couple issues because of how it was shot. So the first issue is it was shot at ISO 1600, and on this camera it is noticeably noisy at 1600. And the second issue is because this is in a cave, there is a limited amount of light available, so in the shadow areas there's a fair amount of noise. Now it's hard to see unless you go into 1:1. And now let's look at it, and you can kind of see that if you really look at the photo, it doesn't have nearly that sort of sharpness that you might be used to when you see things that are well shot with a low ISO. So that's one of the issues. And then if we look in the shadows, you can really kind of see this sort of dot pattern. This is that noisy kind of look. And if you really look at it, you might even be able to pull out some like little red, green, bluish dots in the shadow areas as well too. So let's talk about how far we can push this and what we can do with it. Well, in the detail, um, uh, basically menu here in Lightroom, we have our noise reduction here. So one of the things I can do is color. So if I take the color noise slider and I go all the way to the right, that will most of the time do quite a bit of good as far as going ahead and letting that noise change from having red, green, blue dots to having just kind of an absence of color. So here's what it looked like before, and I'm going to go especially in this sort of area down below. You can kind of see a lot of dots, and now I'm going to pull it back up. So this is allowing a lot of the color to be changed. So you could play with these to basically this one is the strength, and these two down here are going to play with how much you see of it. So how much of a transition you see in the color here. So I'm keeping it pretty much full strength, so that means it's going to do quite a bit to go ahead and just mitigate the color left behind by the noise there. Now, to get rid of this grittiness, we use the luminance. So I'm going to up the luminance here, and I usually start around 50. And with the 50 here, let's just see what it looked like before. So I'm going to go down to back in my history. So here we go, before. See how gritty it looks. And then I'm going to take a look here. And you'll see that it's really sort of smoothed it out. Now, at some point, it's going to kind of soften the entire image too. So you want to make sure that you have a good amount of sharpening going on to bring back your details. So I always like to make sure that you can really kind of see your details in your sharpening. Make sure that you sharpen enough to be able to pull it, but you may need to take down some of the detail in the flatter areas here. So like in her cheeks, I want to make sure that there's a lot of black, but I want to make sure that the other areas have a fair amount of sharpening. So I'm going to take this back down to where I started. So that's what it looked like when I started here today. And then here's me playing around to reduce some of that grittiness from that noise. And you can see you can do a fair amount to play around with these high ISOs. Now, something that has more light, you're going to be able to get away with better. So here's an example. This is pretty well shot. It's got a good amount of light on it here, and I can get away without as much need. And when I do work with the noise, it's probably not going to show up as strong here. So I'll go ahead, because I do have a bit of a dot pattern here. I'm going to take down what little bit of color noise I have, and I will up my luminance slider a little bit, and then I'm going to check to see how my masking is. And I can really kind of play around here and make it pretty clear on this one because it was well lit to begin with, even though it was also shot at 1600. So that's some examples of where noise reduction can be helpful.